You absolutely have to have an obsession. The amount of will and the amount of inertia that you need to create to make fantastic things happen. There's a reason why I've been fortunate enough to have great success, and there's a reason that other people don't have that. You have to be able to run through a wall for this vision.
The business powerhouse
behind some of the world's biggest brands.
Teremana Tequila,
ZOA Energy,
$7 Productions,
just built $1 billion business empire,
and built the careers of The Rock and Henry Cavill.
Dany Garcia.
Dwayne and myself, we didn't enter Hollywood with any type of film connections or theatrical background. We had to earn every step, every comment, every note that went into a script. We had to earn by having incredible success, but also by giving a perspective and a point of view that no one had ever heard before.
You've done this with an extreme successful track record. What are the things that you look for in your next opportunity?
You need to deliver at a level that's undeniable. We have always gone into entertainment with two tenets. All creative has to live in a return on investment box. It makes us great partners for the studio. But the second and most important tenet is
hear the stories, learn the proven methods, and accelerate your growth and future through entrepreneurship. Welcome to the Foundr Podcast with Nathan Chan.
The first question we ask everyone that comes on is, how did you get your job, aka how did you find yourself doing the work you're doing today?
That's a good question to start with, everyone, Nathan. I'd like to say I created my job. Really, the position that I'm in today. I mean, it was a journey that started in finance, a little more traditionally with Merrill Lynch, and then moved into a wealth management position, and then moved into independent production, and then in 2008 moved into sort of architecting Dwayne Johnson's career and having an official move into Hollywood. And then all along that period, my approach had always been building enterprise. My decision actually to go into finance was because, you know what, the time I spend there is going to give me a fantastic understanding of what I need for companies to be built fundamentally. And even when I was working with, when DJ asked me to take over, Dwayne asked me to take over, my approach was looking at his career and he in particular as a brand and IP property and building a corporation around him. So all along, I have been building companies until this position where I'm in, where now I have this beautiful portfolio. I'm the chairwoman. I'm the chairwoman of a few of my other positions within the portfolio. And that sort of created the picture today, but I was building it year after year after year.
And do you think entrepreneurs are built, made, hardwired?
I do think it's a skill that can be acquired, but I think the majority of entrepreneurs are hardwired. I think we tend to look at the world in a different way. The rules that sort of apply feel uncomfortable. And I think the idea of creating something new and being the leader of that creation, that usually comes from inside. Luckily, there are mechanisms that can be built so you can take that position. But I find most of my entrepreneur friends and peers were born.
You have many different companies, right? And you've got a whole portfolio. You've achieved incredible success. I'd just love to know kind of like, how do you find balance? Like, what does a typical day for Dany Garcia look like?
The days, they do have a few anchor structures, which is really wonderful. So training is actually a very big anchor for my day. So all my days start getting up early, spending time with my Frenchies and my husband and a cup of coffee and having a quiet moment. I do a lot of centering because since I do have such a broad portfolio, being very centered in what my philosophy is and understanding how I want to interact the world and how I want my companies to interact in the world is very important. And then I spend my mornings, I actually get my training block out in the morning. If I'm on the East Coast, I get to cheat. For all my West Coast, I get 3 extra hours. And then after that, it's really spending time on what are the most important decisions across the portfolio. Depending upon the city, I'm sort of a different activity. The training is always the same, and that morning is always the same, and the evening is the same. The evening after the long hours has a wind down period, has time with my family, quiet moments before, going off. But if I'm in New York, then I'm usually very active with individuals, but all with purpose. And my company is up there, and if I'm on the West Coast, it's a little bit more production oriented. I do spend a lot of time not actually having appointments or having scheduled calls. About half of my week is unscheduled intentionally so that I can stay at a very high perspective and I can look at what these companies are doing and understand where they need to be. So I try never to get too much into the soup of anything because then I lose my perspective. And all of my companies, while they are very varied, they have one thing in common. They're all consumer facing. They all have relationships with the audience or consumer. So that means that part of my responsibility is actually staying in tune to the consumer and the audience. And if I'm too deep into these companies, I lose that perspective.
Have you ever experienced like burnout or anything because you have so much going on?
2016 was, it was an incredible growth year. And we ended the year, my husband took and I went to Hawaii in January, and I think I slept on a sofa outside every day for about 2 weeks straight. I would wake up, he would get up, he would go work out, I would fall asleep on that sofa. And that's where I had recognized that everything had accelerated so quickly. My process had not adjusted for it. So I became really good at that point after 2016 of continuously firing myself from positions so that I could move higher in my perspective. But always it's not a moment, managing or keeping balance of this is not a set sort of process. It changes as the portfolio changes and grows every year. So again, I have to put that investment into looking at how I'm working to make sure I can continue to work.
You sit around firing yourself, like what, can you tell us more about that?
If I'm going to do more, I can't do the same thing. Right? Because whatever I'm doing doesn't live in those activities. So if I want to move up, I began to realize I need to kick myself out. So I literally would fire myself. I remember when we hired our chief marketing officer, Maya Lassery, who's amazing for $7 marketing. That was a fired position. I had taken a lot of the responsibilities of marketing as I was working with our production companies and DJ. And finally, I was like, okay, there is someone who's going to live in this world 24/7, and she's going to do it so much better than I can because I need to do all these other things and because she's greatly skilled. The last firing of myself was probably from the official role as Dwayne Johnson's manager. I fired myself. He was very gracious as I fired myself because I needed to move into a strategic advisory position over his enterprise in particular, which is ginormous. So yeah, I've become really comfortable. Once I start to have so much friction in the positions, or I'm feeling a lot of frustration, or even, I'm spending a lot of time on minutia and details, that I've begun to realize is the signal that it's time to fire myself and see if I can move up and advance my skills. So
Love to start delving into some of these companies. First, we'll start with GSTQ.
Sure. GSTQ. I'm so glad you asked about that one first. It is my oldest brand IP property. It was conceived when I was a young teenager. And I was, we talked about entrepreneurs being born. Well, I think many of them were probably like me, very angsty in their young age and sort of looking at the world differently and not understanding why things happen the way they happen. And as a teenager, I had pretty strong aspirations for what I wanted to accomplish, but I had nothing that reflected that back to me. So one day in orchestra, I was a French horn player. We played the Royal National Anthem, God Save the Queen. I did not know that was God Save the Queen was the title of the British national anthem. I was so touched. I was so blown away by the idea that an entire nation is praying to God for the Queen that I was like, this is an amazing title. And so I would say to myself, I would just start writing GSTQ, and then created and I would consider myself the Queen. And I would say there's something bigger. And you know what? God save the Queen, and that's me, and I'm going to get there. And it became a mindset mantra, which actually carried with me all the way through to the initiation, to the birth of GSTQ. So GSTQ was my idea of a fashion relationship that was built upon mindset and philosophy, that was built upon the idea that you will be polished to perform. That was built upon the idea that fashion could not only beautify you, but could be a support mechanism to get you to where you wanted to be. Another aspect of GSTQ was, for myself personally, as a bodybuilder and a woman who had to do so many different things, I had a passionate relationship with fashion. Things didn't fit. They were constricting. They were tight. I'm trying to move from one thing into a production meeting to, meeting with my fellow CEOs. And I didn't have clothes that could move with me and also celebrate my athleticism. So that went into a lot of the fundamentals that are behind GSTQ and how we service our clients.
Yeah, I love it. And can you tell us about kind of the early stages of bringing that to life?
We started it, as I'm thinking now, in 21. Probably 3 years ago was the process where we began with the ideation. Very similar to building out a franchise or a Marvel universe. We spent a lot of time on what I call the GSTQ Bible, the birth of what this brand is, the relationship, the fundamental principles. How does it make people feel? So we had a very long philosophical period of time. And then we moved into the ideation of clothing and creativity. And then we ran smack into COVID. So COVID allowed us to continue. We had to pause, but we continued to refine. And then we were able to release the product just recently. But it was something that was overriding and sort of just quietly moving along as I was working on these other companies until we could finally bring it to fruition.
Why did you spend so much time there on that piece?
Well, when founders are going, which they're going because they internally know the idea, right? But they, many cases, haven't articulated it clearly. And GSTQ was going to be first of all, it's a lifelong project for me, but was also going to be something that needed a tremendous amount of expertise and support from other individuals. So that time articulating and really pulling the philosophy and creating examples of what the philosophy looked like was vital so that all the team members could be very, very clear. The mindset approach to fashion is extremely rare. It's very, very unique. And to blend that in with the art and have them be rooted together, or even have that philosophy be the platform that the art has to live on, that feels different. And I wanted to make sure that all my team members were extremely comfortable and understood what that commitment meant. So that is really, I think that is extreme. That is absolutely the payoff when you do spend so much time before you actually start running.
Yeah, I see. And talk us through the challenges so far.
I think the challenges have been challenges that individuals know, factories shutting down, deliveries, getting, the design portion, not being able to meet in person, not being able to meet our incredible manufacturing partners overseas in person, and slowing down a bit. But that luckily the pacing, I actually am pleased to have a startup occur during a very constricted time forces us to be conservative and cautious and really measure. So it's almost like we have a quiet period to launch before everything is up and running. And we've utilized that. So we tried to take advantage of all the moments.
Yeah. And around the business model, direct to consumer, what's the vision? Is that the vision to stay a direct to consumer brand? What does 10 years look like? Talk us through it.
Totally. So the direct to consumer, I think that's for us, it's very important. I like the mediums. My mediums are very much rooted in storytelling. And this company in particular has a very strong film theatrical element to how we're communicating what this brand is. And that experience happens best on a media platform. So it's actually very aligned to direct to consumer. I see us naturally evolving to an experience where it's brick and mortar, but it won't occur until I can easily translate the theatrical moments of experiencing this brand and put it into a brick and mortar position. I want to bridge that. I don't want the experience to go in to our stores to be just like going into any store or a Neiman Marcus. So it needs to be something that flows through. So that's going to take a little bit of time. But I'm not in a rush. I mean, we know how to communicate. We do create experiences that are very grassroots, whether it's trunk shows or, intimate sort of invitation only so people can experience and we can get that groundswell. But it's not something that I'm immediately rushing to. I do see the expansion of our line. I'd love to tackle men next, which actually has come back to me often from my peers is, when do we bring our philosophy into men's clothing? And I think very importantly, you have to strongly win in women's and men's before you would then extend into, for example, children's. I see GSTQ as being a brand that will meet the needs of the consumers where they want to go. We want to build the credibility, have that design element, have sustainability in our process. But I'm very excited about continued expansion.
Hey guys, I really hope you're feeling inspired from today's interview. The truth is, there's never been a better time to build an e-commerce business. And the best part is, you don't need to do it alone. That's where Foundr Plus comes in, which I'm really excited to share with you. If you are feeling stuck in your e-commerce business, lacking the confidence to really move forward, or you're worrying about making costly mistakes or how to drive your sales, Foundr Plus is here to support you. You get access to a customized learning pathway with proven frameworks from successful e-commerce founders for fast results, a supportive community. We have weekly live mentorship and workshops and exclusive savings on startup tools and 24/7 real human support. You can try Foundr Plus today for just $1 for 7 days so you can accelerate your business goals. Just visit foundr.com/start $trial or click the link in the description to claim your trial. All right, now let's jump back into the show. Awesome. Well, look, we have a few more companies to go through. I'd love to talk about the XFL.
First of all, I've been an athlete all my life, and the XFL acquisition is one of my most exciting acquisitions to date. So the XFL, the second version of the XFL that happened in 2020, I was saddened because I wasn't a part of it. I have a great relationship with Vince McMahon. And when he actually launched it, I was like, darn, I really had wanted to be. And I was very pleased with the product they attempted to put on this field because they had a 5-week run. And then unfortunately, COVID really came and shut them down. And as a live event startup, they didn't have the financial metrics to support it. But those 5 weeks and the ethos and what they were able to capture and the innovation, the technology they were able to put on the field was very exciting to me. So when I found out that the company had been going through bankruptcy, I pulled together the team. We started to do some analysis. I called Dwayne Johnson up, my partner, and I said, I have a crazy idea. And he says, he actually tells the story as well. And he's like, I love crazy. Tell me. I've called him numerous times with that. I have the crazy idea. And it's taken us on great journeys. And then I shared with him the XFL and the full scope of what we could do with that incredible property in our hands. Not only for Dwayne personally, not only is the XFL something he could see himself in, because he did attempt to go to the NFL, wasn't successful, went up to the CFL, wasn't successful. If the XFL had been there, he would have gone. That would have been his next step. We always say this career was his plan B, but he did really well with plan B. But for us, we were looking at an opportunity to be the stewards of football in a 360 sort of viewpoint, multidimensionally, looking at everything that surrounds the football and taking responsibility for that. So how are the athletes experiencing it? How are the fans? How are our partners? How are our sponsors? How are our production partners? And we have a very specific point of view on how the storytelling and the interaction and how the XFL should be experienced and not watched. So we have, in fact, just came back this Monday from a full intensive in New York City as far as our XFL and our XFL rollout. So we're very excited. I would say historically, if you look at everything I've done in my last 28 some years has led to this moment when it comes to the XFL. It demands all of my expertise in all of the different areas to be able to do what I want to do with this property.
It's quite a complex play. I'd love to, can we delve a little bit more on that?
first of all, you have the complexity of the game of football in the United States, which you need to deliver at a level that's undeniable. So right there, those expectations and executions are its own sort of company in itself. And then what we're doing is we're wrapping around it we're taking control of the entire universe that lives within football, and we're wrapping around it various elements of entertainment and media and expression and live events, so that not only do you have the game and dynamic play, but you have football being a catalyst to other experiences. And in that, you start to garner great complexity. And that's all about execution. So I think one of the great things that I recognize, especially in partnership with Dwayne and in partnership with Redbird Capital, who are our other partners in ownership of the XFL, is that we clearly bring a skill set that doesn't exist in major league sports. And that is where I see incredible opportunity. And that's where we have been building out the business plan to really take advantage of that expertise. So you've got to have an ace team right for the game, for the players, for how they're experiencing life. And then you have to overlay that with an additional set of skills to take care of every other aspect that touches the fans and touches your partners and touches how the game is being experienced. How is it being experienced with gaming? How is it being experienced on your phone? So, the challenge is great, but it's been an incredible experience. I love the relationships. I love the people we have on board, the quality.
To take on like an acquisition like that and an industry like that, what kind of obsession is required to really understand it? Because it's like a totally different world. You need to immerse yourself, right?
For the scope and size and the enormity of what the XFL is, it's a very loud project, right? It's very public facing, and we're not even launched, but there's football in itself. You absolutely have to have an obsession. You have to have the fundamental tenets of entrepreneurism, of drive, create something new. There's not a model, but I'm going to go ahead and create a model. So though you have to have comfort in that skill set so that you can then look at the property fearlessly and be comfortable saying, okay, these are the directions and these are the elements we're going to add to football, which will not affect the institutionalization of the game, because that's the other thing. This is not a property that you can just change dramatically how the game is played. You have to honor that, but you still need to bring the elements of today, right? And today and tomorrow. So the amount of brain burn, I like to say, is great. And it doesn't have to be all my brain. But where that 40% that only I can deliver or Dwayne can deliver, we have to be 100% focused on that. So the rest of the tenets of the game and a fantastic game and football operations and player personnel situations, you've got to have the best of the best in those positions so that there's nothing there but excellence. And then that allows you to focus in the areas, and you have to be able to bridge it over. I have fantastic partners, and I have an incredible group of individuals who believe in how I see the game and how Dwayne sees the game, and is open to a point of view of female leadership. So I'm the chairwoman of the XFL. So my philosophies and my leadership fall over the entire sport of football. Male dominated sport. So, that position is a major position, but it also allows me to bring incredible value to the game. So yes, when you say, do you have to be obsessed? You absolutely have to be obsessed, and that's okay.
I think, to build anything of true worth and significance, it has to be an obsession.
Absolutely. It can be a balanced obsession, but it still has to be obsession. I used to say early in the sort of Dwayne Johnson build out, as I would bring team members in, I would have to say, you have to be able to run through a wall for this vision. You've got to be that person who can love even more passionately than maybe the individual you're focusing, like that. The amount of will and the amount of inertia that you need to create to make fantastic things happen. There's a reason why, I've been fortunate enough to have great success. And there's a reason that other people don't have that. They literally, this space that you just talked about, very few people want to enter into that space. And then if they enter, they don't recognize, they don't want to stay there. But that's the difference maker.
I have to move to $7. Can you talk us, first off, how does it feel to kind of produce some of the most successful films in the world?
It is so satisfying. It's been a long journey. I think we're 42 films in. We have quite a slate, but it is, we are a unique production company. We have always gone into entertainment with two tenets. The tenet that I brought into sort of our $7 world is that all creative has to live in a return on investment box. We never move away from that. It makes us great partners for the studio. Very few producers come in with that point of view, saying, we're going to speak to the bottom line before we even begin shooting. But the second and most important tenet is that we are audience first. So anything creative, we never just do it for ourselves. We make the decision as if the audience member is sitting right there next to us. That has allowed us to make decisions that have led to global success, that have led to this sort of 4-quadrant appeal that we love. We love reach and extension. And I'm so proud of what the company has done. I'm proud of our team members, and I love our projects.
Can you talk us through kind of, I guess, the challenges that an industry like that presents that others don't?
The greatest challenge, I was speaking with an independent producer or a journalist who covers a lot of independent, and they said, isn't it much more difficult to do an independent film than to do a major blockbuster film? And I shared with them that it's actually so much more complex. When I do a $230 million budget film, I sign my name on that budget, as does Dwayne, as does my president of production, Dany Garcia. We literally sign our names, authenticating that budget and the enormity of those dollars. When you're doing a little bunt to first base or a single to first base, as compared to you need a grand slam, a walk-off grand slam. Those are two different things. So I think the major challenge has been because the numbers are so great, because the risks are so high, getting studios comfortable with your point of view as to filmmaking. And Dwayne and myself, we didn't enter Hollywood with any type of film connections or theatrical background, or, I came from finance. His entrance into entertainment was the WWE. We were not the norm. So we had to earn every step, every comment, every note that went into a script. We had to earn by having incredible success, but also by giving a perspective and a point of view that no one had ever heard before. So, this audience first mentality, sort of articulating it and letting it be a why when we were talking about the marketing. So even though we weren't producers, we were in marketing meetings. We hadn't earned that spot yet. We always continuously over-delivered so people could understand that our philosophical filmmaking approach had true merit. So yeah, that was a slog. When you're coming in as such an outsider and such a different individual, to finally get the industry to embrace that, yes, you have taste, you know how to speak to the audience, and you have reach, and you know how to come in at budget, close to. It took some time.
So why did you decide to kind of start producing films?
The decision was control, creative control. First of all, there was also a decision of, I want to, as far as enterprise build out, how are we going to professionalize around our creative skills and our audience first approach? So a production company is the absolute best way to do that. Simultaneously, it allowed us to set up so that we could have more control over the films, and we could inject our philosophical point of view into how these films were being made. So it was a natural progression. And then if you think about me as an entrepreneur, you can see that at some point I'm not going to be comfortable in this position until we can get control. So it was just another natural progression of building out the portfolio.
I have to ask as well, you've produced some really successful films. Do you have any kind of crazy stories behind the scenes, anything you can share with us?
I do have I do have something that, and it's one of our first films. It was actually the first time so we weren't producing this. This is the first film Dwayne had ever done. So we were still married at the time, and he was wrestling with the WWE. And so he went out to film the Scorpion King, not the Scorpion King. It was one of the mummies, but it had the character of the Scorpion King, and he had to go out there. And he had 103-degree fever the entire time and was running in the deserts in California shooting these scenes because it was his first opportunity and he was not going to miss it. And I specifically remember, I wasn't on set with him. I specifically remember the back and forth about hydrating. Okay, you shot the scene. Okay, are you in the tent? And he would just not stop. There was no way he was going to miss this opportunity to be in this film. And that was such a mark about someone. For me, it's more of a personal story because it was such a great example of no matter what, just taking advantage of an opportunity with your own two hands and making it happen, even if you have 103-degree temperature in the desert.
Yeah, that's wild. So look, we have to keep moving, but I want to talk about talent management. So, you've managed Dwayne, you've managed Henry Cavill. What are the sorts of things that you have to consider when wearing that hat?
Well, you'll appreciate this very much. So the talent management in particular, and even my title of manager, if we were not in Hollywood, we would have a different title. But for the entertainment industry, for them to understand why I was in the room and why I was giving all the strategic advice and why I was positioned films and why I wanted these licenses to come in and here's the overarching theme, we needed a word so that everyone could understand why I was there because I was doing unique things. So the idea of management and letting the industry look at me as a manager came from that. But really, in my approach, because there's many different type of managers, and managers who are focused on how the bills are paid and what's happening at the house. My goal as a manager was to make sure the talent I worked with could not only have successful, far-reaching careers, but could then have capital structures built around them to experience capital events that were fueled by all of the work they had done in film or television or production. So really translating an intangible asset into a tangible asset. So with that, there's an incredible amount of fiduciary responsibility, right? So you're not only talking about the business plan build out, you're talking about a core that's an individual and understanding what that individual needs to not only sustain and be a huge success, but to be a balanced success with family and live a life that can also have the enormities of being a leading man and still have downtime, but also carry the weight of what happens when you now own corporations. So, there's a lot less of ego and, how agents and managers are looked at in Hollywood, sort of those Hollywood-esque stories, and really much more of stewardship and a thoughtfulness to the approach. And when we talk about obsession, you have to become obsessed with your client's success and their vision. And in many cases, you have to hold what they want to achieve greater than what they want, greater than what they can. Because when they're in the soup and they're filming and it's every day and it's 12-hour days and you're holding that final vision, you almost have two different perspectives, and sort of bridging that perspective becomes very challenging. So in my approach, I would say it's very heady and it's very thoughtful and strategic, but you never can lose sight of the individual at the center of this experience, which is the talent.
Hey guys, have you ever thought, what if I could just work with somebody one-on-one that's already done it to help me start or grow my e-commerce brand? Well, we get asked this question all the time. We have an amazing network of founders, super successful founders at Foundr. So we launched this coaching and mentorship program. So if you want to start your e-commerce business and work with us one-on-one to help you launch it fast, then go to foundr.com/start mentorship to see if you qualify. Or if you want to grow your e-commerce brand even faster and work with our experienced coaches and mentors one-on-one, then go to foundr.com/grow mentorship. All right, now let's jump back into the show.
Yeah, managing talent has really changed over these past, I'd say, even 5 years. Can you talk us through kind of your take on the landscape?
At the end of the day, the quality of what is being created, if you are an influencer, but you're what's considered a thin influencer, you have a moment, and that moment is maybe just one character and it's on, that platform, and you just that only character, that's all that you're delivering. You begin to minimize yourself because the audience has a consumption rate that is ginormous now. So, looking to the individuals I work with now, they have deliverables on multiple platforms, and they always have a very large overarching story, something that's bigger than what they are, that they pull from to grab the intimacy within social media. Influencers kind of have one conversation right now. They have the social media as their television show, and they're a TV star, and it's one thing. And it's sort of developing that skill to say, how am I broadening this one lane into 10 lanes so that people can experience different parts of me, and the quality of what they're experiencing is as good as that one character that's on Twitch, that's on, any one of the platforms. So I think keeping that expansive point of view today, especially with content creators, and knowing that you want as quickly as possible move from one thing into two things to give them depth and breadth, leads to longevity. I think that's for all management, though that point of view has to stay all the time.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. It's a fascinating, really growing space, right? Like the rise of a personal brand, personal branding, more than ever. People are buying from people, not companies.
And I'll say one last thing, Nathan, which I think is really wonderful, is when you say people are buying for people, the truth of that, it also speaks to, you can no longer be just a facade. Like the accountability of who you are, people will find you. They will find the other angles. So I do like that there's greater transparency. And it's, I think influencers would like to think that there's not greater transparency and no one's finding out, but the truth is someone is going to find out. So there is a bit of a demand for some authenticity and self-growth. If you're going to have a very large relationship with a large audience, you have to be responsible to that relationship and be responsible to who you are, so that relationship is authentic and it's real. And I think that's really interesting. I think that's a huge difference than 10 to 15 years ago, where you could keep the shadow, you could keep the space.
Well, look, I could keep going, conscious of time. A few more things we have to go through that I'd love to kind of delve into. The Garcia companies in the future, kind of like, what is I guess you've done this with a extreme successful track record, like all the different companies that you're bringing into your portfolio. I'd love to know kind of what are the things that you look for in your next opportunity or the next investment or the next thing that you're going to work on and add into the portfolio.
Even though the portfolio is very diverse, if you actually go up, I would say 50,000 feet, you will see that there's strong similarities. There's a strong philosophical arc. There's a tone that are very similar within all the companies. So that's going to be very important. Any addition is going to complement what's already in the portfolio and cross complement. So I look for my companies to elevate the other companies that are within the portfolio. That's really important to me. It builds community and it builds a sense, and it gives me 1 + 1 = 3, or maybe 5 or 10, which would be great. I'm going to continue my consumer facing investment. I would like now, and the XFL has given me this incredible opportunity. And I think there are other opportunities in sports. I also just have ownership in a minor league baseball team in Staten Island with the Yankees and a few other partners. I'm very intrigued by sports and women's sports now. And I'm intrigued by not only, properties that have obviously a consumer deliverable, audience facing, but that allow me to work with a group of individuals like sports does to elevate their experience, to elevate their lives. So I'm looking for greater impact within my investments to not only just here's what you're consuming or this is what you saw, but how is the impact actually influencing more of a larger audience? Sports is an incredible mechanism to do that when you do the right storytelling. And just as importantly, when you take care of the athletes in the right way. So, any property that comes in is going to give me multiple influential points. That's what I'm really looking for. I mean, of course, without saying the business model, return on investment, the normal assumptions of what we need. But when you're looking at it philosophically, I'm really looking for investments that with their success beyond just a transaction. There's actually domestic or global success and influence in a positive way.
You said something very interesting to me around kind of it has to, 1 + 1 = 3 with a company you look to bring into the portfolio. Can you give us an example around how they all kind of intertwine or complement each other?
There's a very linear approach. For example, if you were to look at, let's take a look at ZOA Energy, right? Our energy drink. It is the number one new energy drink, fastest growing energy drink, which is exciting. But if you speak, the basis of that company is positivity. That company is based upon positivity. That brand is positivity. And it's an energy drink and it's better for you. And it's about achievement and goals. And how are you connecting? What are you doing? And we went into a white space where the deliverable is not premium. They're not delivering the best quality ingredients. And we consume energy drinks. Now, if you look at that property and then you look at Project Rock, or you look at the XFL, or you look at, for example, the Athleticon experience that's still in development, you begin to see that there is a flow over, not just from, ZOA can sponsor XFL, et cetera, but there's a conversation about how life is being lived. And then if you look at these different properties, and then you look at $7 Productions, right, an audience first reach, you actually begin to see themes where they all actually do make sense. If we do, for example, our Black Adam movie, which is coming out next year, and I think I got to see if we announced our date, but our Black Adam movie, you have a conversation, you have a Project Rock conversation there, you have a ZOA Energy conversation. It's Black Adam. So you have a Teremana Tequila conversation in there. It's not so direct, but you can actually speak to them. They make sense. There's a universe where they all live together. That is very, very important. And then you have the success of one property elevate the conversation and the awareness of other properties. So there's the direct line, right? Again, as we said, the ZOA XFL sponsorship, super easy. And then there's 2 or 3 or 4 steps away where you have a halo effect of the success of one property influencing another property. And that becomes very, very important. And now how we highlight it and how we actually tie that into the consumer is secret. But that is actually very important, is to then blend the conversations, because individuals will be aware of it, but you do have to use certain mechanisms to say, hey, these do make sense, and they make sense in a way that's better for you and actually enhances whatever you're experiencing. And those are, that's a whole other class.
Well, look, Dany, this was an incredible interview. Thank you so much for your time. We've gone a little over, but yeah, thank you so much. This was like really, really interesting and fascinating. I learned a ton too, and super inspired. So yeah, congratulations on all your success, and I'm sure you can do more big things.
It was a pleasure speaking to you. I'm glad you told me Friday is going well. I look forward to my Friday tomorrow.
If you loved this episode, make sure to check out my interview with Emma Greed on how solving a problem she was so passionate about led to the creation of Skims and Good American.
And so I do think it's so much of it starts with like addressing things that bother you, that you find, you've got to create a solution for, because, at the end of the day, you've got to be passionate enough and sometimes crazy enough to go round and round and round to actually solve a problem.